when the romance and romantic suspense boom hit the market. And I was finally standing on the right street corner when the bus went by. So that was how I got published. And then the romance boom of the 80s and 90s just took off, and we've never looked back. You know, the publishing world has never looked back.
Along your career path, you've had to reinvent yourself a couple times, which shows if you want to be a writer, you need resilience. You need kind of almost to be stubborn in a sense. And you talk about how Jayne became Jayne Ann Krentz, Jane Castle, Amanda Quick, and many other alter literary egos.
Pro tip for anybody else out there who is aspiring to write, or if you know any aspiring writers and they're thinking of taking pen names, don't go there. Don't go there. Just do not do this. And the reason is because nobody's going to remember all three of your names, and that is doubly true today. Because it is so hard to build a name in today's market, let alone three names. And even after you've done that, people who read you under one name aren't necessarily going to follow you into the other name. Because what I have learned over the years is that the landscape of the fictional world is very important to readers. I have a lot of readers who will read me only as Amanda Quick because they only want the historical setting. I have other readers who only read me as contemporary because they don't want to read historicals, and some, like Christina Dodd, my arch rival, who like the futuristics. And that's just the way it is. And if you think about it, it's very true throughout all the genres, and you can see it really clearly in mysteries. People who read cozies don't read hard-boiled noir, or usually. It's just every genre has its subgenres or I don't know what to call them, subgenres here. And a lot of it has to do with the fictional world. People like to return to a familiar town. You know, a lot of cozies are built on small towns, for example, and you get to know the characters and stuff like that. And that's part of the fun of the landscape. Everybody knows how to read a book set in Gaslight England, because everybody has enough awareness of Sherlock Holmes to step instantly into that world. So Gaslighting, in the romance, the Regency romance, is a very well-known territory. The result is that you don't have to fill it full of a lot of research anymore because everybody knows, understands how it works. Yeah. Where was I going with that? Oh, the tree names, yeah, so don't go there. My advice.
Let's go ahead and talk about your new book that brought you here to us today, Shattering Dawn. What do you want readers to know about the book?
This is the third book in a trilogy. Each book in the trilogy stands alone because each is an independent murder mystery as well as an independent romance. But there is an overarching mystery that links the three books. And the mystery involves three women. 3 books, 3 women. Very clever, yeah. 3 different stories. But the overarching mystery involves 3 women who walked into the wrong hotel one night, lost the night of their lives, and woke up with paranormal powers, psychic powers. I should specify, when I say paranormal, I'm talking just psychic. I don't do witches and vampires and magic, okay? I love to read them, but I can't write them. That's not my core story. So my characters all have a psychic vibe. And I like the psychic vibe because it is, I think of it as one step beyond intuition. And everybody can kind of make that leap. At any rate, they walk in, they walk out the next morning, place is in flames, they're running for their lives, and then they realize somebody has run experiments on them. And out of that experiments has come their psychic powers, but who was running the experiments? So they fire up a podcast called The Lost Night Files, which is aimed at looking at finding other people who have been through the same experience. And that from the investigations of the Lost Night Files come the 3 independent murder mysteries that come out. What was it? The first one was Sleep No More. The second one was The Night Island, and now this one. So this is this is the one that's always hardest, right? Because this is the setup. This is the you got to tie everything together. And I will admit that there was stuff I didn't know how I was going to do that until the very end. But that happens to me every book I write. I don't know how I'm going to wind it up until the end. It's not fun to write that way. Again, I don't recommend it. If you can plot ahead, that's real nice. My problem is, although I start out with I had the overarching problem in the stories, but I start out with that, and then somewhere along the way, it just keeps changing on me. And mostly that happens, I think, John, because for better or for worse, I don't get my best ideas until I'm actually writing. I think the act of creativity begets creativity. And when I'm in a plotting mode, I'm in a different place in my head, I think. I can't think as creatively as I can when I actually get on the page. But that's just me.
Let's talk a little bit about what you like to call core story, because you say every author has one that you can see is kind of their literary DNA or their fingerprint.
Yeah.
Two things you've said that are part of your core story are trust, and I thought this was interesting, characters reinventing themselves, because you've reinvented yourself as an author. So
it's my book. I get around with it. No, when I look back at the start of my career, that's very true. I see my core story, and I didn't until midway through my career when I had actually managed to kill off yet another pen name, because that's kind of why I had to reinvent things. I mean, it was always for business reasons. It was not because I wanted to write under a different name. And in this business, it's easy to kill off a name. Poor sales, sink, and all of a sudden you can't sell to anybody, any publisher. So you invent a new name. That was always kind of the escape hatch, and I've done that several times. Mostly because I kept trying to stray into futuristic romance and romantic suspense, and nobody wanted to read that. But that's a whole other story. That's changed, but thank God. But so the core story, the first time I realized I actually had one, was when I had killed off the Jayne Ann Krentz name for the first time, with 3 books in what is called futuristic romantic suspense. By the end of the 3rd book, I couldn't sell to anybody in New York. So I decided to step back and either quit or figure out how I could keep doing what I wanted to keep doing. And when I looked at my core story to see if I could take it elsewhere, I suddenly realized that I wasn't really dealing with a story so much as certain emotional conflicts between the main characters. And the emotional conflicts that I was working with again and again were matters of trust and reinvention. And in the case of trust, it was 2 characters who were thrown together and have to figure out a way to trust each other in order to survive the danger that they are in. Maybe only allies for a time, but somehow they have to be allies long enough to survive. And from that allied status comes the respect and eventually the love. That is the way I like to tell the story. So instead of friends to lovers, I write allies to lovers. I'll put it that way. But my characters are also in this fix in the first place, usually because they are in the process of reinventing themselves. Something has gone terribly wrong, as in the case where these women have had their lives upended by these experiments that were run on them. And because of that, they've had to basically regroup and reinvent themselves in order to find a path forward. So those are the 2 core emotions that I'm working with. And once I realized that, I thought, well, dang, theoretically you can take this anywhere, because all genres run on emotion. Those conflicts are what brings us back to an author. You know, it's not the clever plot. We do like clever plots, we admire clever plots, but if you come back to an author again and again, it's usually because there's something in the characters themselves that affirms your own core values, or that shocks those core values, something that gets you one way or another when it comes to core values. And if you don't react to an author, often it's because you're not seeing what you want in the book. You're not getting that rush. So I think the core story is important, and I think every author has one, and I think authors spend their careers exploring it. So, and that's my story.
And it's a good one. What I think is interesting to me as a reader is there is a difference between an author's core story, their emotional, the landscape that they write in, and their voice. How they tell the story and the story that they're telling can be different, because I read all of your worlds because I read you for the voice, not for the landscape.
That's why I like you so much.
That's why you send the check every month.
I get my money's worth.
You do. But for me, can you talk a little bit about voice? Because I see things in your voice, and I wonder if I'm reading it correctly.
You know, if it works for you, it works for you. There's no right or wrong, but I agree with you on voice, and we are attracted to an author because of the voice. And one voice doesn't speak to everyone. And that's really true if you look at the audio books, where the narrator, the voice, the storyteller, can make or break a book. And how many times have you loved the book and then hated the audio? And if you'd read the audio, you would never have gone to the book. That's the value, that's voice. And that's true in the written word as much as it is in the audio word, but it's harder to see in the written word because we're not used to thinking of it that way. But every author has a voice. And I always tell new authors starting out, the good news is you've got a voice, or the bad news is you've got a voice. Because what appeals to some readers is going to turn off others, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Because if you neutralize that voice, you'll lose them all. So, voice is everything.
Well, one of the things I love about your voice, and I say this in the best possible way, in the kindest possible way, is you write very snarkily. That's what it appeals to me. I don't think you could write serious literature. It would
Oh, keep going, John.
That's why I read your books. But humor is one component of your voice.
Sass. That's so much nicer than snark.
I'm trying to say current. Say what the kids say.
How about Riz? Have I got Riz?
I don't even know what that is.
Charisma.
Oh, okay. I learned something today. Thank you, Jayne.
It's probably all really out of fashion. The Riz.
But do you see humor as one of the components of your...
Yeah, because I have tried to write darker stuff, and I just find myself going toward the light. A classic example is my favorite, what I consider the foundational book of romantic suspense is the Gothic. I love to read Gothics. I absolutely suck at writing them. And it's for two reasons. First, I'm a dialogue-driven author. I am not an atmospheric author. I don't do lots of description well. And this is where I always pause for a public service announcement that if you do come across a paragraph of description in one of my books, I would appreciate it if you'd slow down, read it word for word, because that's how I got it in there. But when I reach dialogue, I'm flying. But dialogue does not drive the Gothic. It's an atmosphere, you know it when you see it, a classic Gothic, like Rebecca. It's dark, and you have to be able to describe that darkness, and that doesn't come across well for most authors in terms of...
Rebecca is also about a house, so if you can't describe Manderley, then...
They lived in a mobile home out back and overlooking the cliff. Yeah, no, it's got to be a big house. Barbara Peters, the owner of the store here, and I had many chats about what does it take to make a Gothic, and we've come up with about 3 or 4 that we think are defining principles. We did this in company with J.T. Ellison. Have you read any of? Yeah, okay. It has to be a character, usually a woman, who is isolated and on her own and in a situation where she doesn't know who to trust. The big house has become a standard part of that story. The isolated because houses have that closed-in, claustrophobic feeling, and the danger in a Gothic is always from within. It's not the outside attackers, it's somewhere inside that house. And those elements I just love to read them.
Well, you often have two heroes, one who's theoretically the good guy and one who's the bad guy, but you never know for sure.
A dangerous anti-hero, or yeah. Those that come. So I think that I love that story. Like I said, and that Gothic is, I think, a foundational book of my genre.
You have been writing, we won't say for how many years because that dates both of us, but you do have experience. What has surprised you about publishing as you've seen your books go with different publishing houses? You've written different things.
Oh gosh, so many. Publishing is, the market is very fickle. Readers shift and come and go. The readers who loved you 10 years ago may have dropped you along the way in favor of somebody else. New readers find you. They didn't know you wrote. They didn't know you were that old. It's the mystery of the publishing world is that nobody really knows how to market books. It's just because you can't predict which books. It's not like reproducing widgets that everybody needs a widget and it's going to be the same widget that they bought last time. The genres are constantly refreshing themselves as new voices come in, older voices change, and readers move back and forth between what they love to read and what they feel like reading. Maybe they want to read romantic suspense when they're younger. Maybe they want to read something more noirish when they get older, or something like that. You see it here in the store.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I also think one of the problems with publishing is it's not widgets, but they want it to be widgets.
Yeah.
So something becomes popular, Gone Girl, or whatever's the hot pick, and they keep reproducing it until they kill it.
Yeah, years ago when the first blockbuster serial killer book came out, at least that I was aware of, Red Dragon.
Yeah.
I said, well, who'd want to read any more of those? thus cementing my legacy as a forecaster of modern fictional trends. Because you said they're coming back.
They are.
Serial killers.
How do you define success as an author? You've had more than 15 New York Times bestsellers. You've written more than 120 books. What does success look like to you?
If I can just keep getting published. Yeah. I love the writing process. And I love that moment, from the day-to-day moments when the scene comes together on the page. And you're not looking at 400 or 500 pages, you're just looking at one scene and it's a little perfect scene and you think, oh, look, did that. It works just like I thought. And that feeling that's the little daily rush of satisfaction that I think it takes to keep moving forward. And I suspect when people talk about having writer's block, is they're no longer getting that daily rush, because that's what fuels, I think, most people to keep writing. And it would be awful to not be able to achieve that anymore. But in terms of the surprise of the publishing world, one thing that does not surprise me is the fact that the genres continue to flourish. They just keep getting refreshed, but we really don't invent new genres. They're always, they're classic. What are they? So the suspense, mystery, suspense, the romance, horror, science fiction, fantasy, and literary. Yeah. Everything you see on these shelves, I bet John could tell you what category it fits into. And if you truly write something that is off the wall and doesn't fit into any category, it will probably never find a market. Even the market that might like it, because how do you sell it?
Isn't that a challenge for you as an author, though? Because you have to write what you want to read, what's true to you as a reader, but you also have to be smart about the market. I mean, you may want to write a mystery about an Eskimo who solves crimes in Greenland, but if only 3 people want to read the book, good luck.
Yeah, and that's why I say it pays to know your core story. Because the core story is, the author can take that anywhere. They just need to change out the characters and the setting. And that's the superficial part, in the sense. The names of the characters and their description and their setting. The description can be abandoned at any point. Just pick another genre.
What does the actual writing process for you look like?
Well, I will start. I'm one of those dreaded early risers. I know. So hate me. So whatever creativity I have for the day is probably going to be in the mornings. And that's when I like to write. That's my favorite time to write, at least the creative stuff on the page. And in the afternoons, I'm more inclined to do the research or go shopping. Therapy, retail therapy. Outlining, that kind of thing, about the next day. Trying to figure out where I'm going to spin off for the next day. There are occasions when you do write in the afternoon because you have to, but for the raw creativity and for the real pleasure of writing, I prefer those mornings. And then by noon, I'm pretty beat in terms of, I want to go to, I need something else to get going on. So, and the evenings are a glass of wine, the evening news, and whatever the cooking shows.
Really, I had no idea you watched cooking shows.
Oh, as my friend Megan Chan says, there's something very zen about watching somebody else prepare. I love America's Test Kitchen and Milk Street. And the bakery, the baking.
Great British bakery.
Yeah. Very soothing.
What about Jayne as a reader? You talked a little bit about how you got started. How have you progressed? Are there certain books and authors that you find?
I have not read a full comic book in years. I would like. I did move beyond comic books. Although I'm a fan of the Hellboy series. Because of the humor. Yeah. But in terms of reading, I find myself leaning more and more to. It's invariably I'm going to be drawn to something with romantic suspense elements. It's the core story I love to write. It's the core story I love to read. And my favorite type of book to read would be a good gothic, like Simone St. James, or someone along those lines. It would be fun to read. But thanks to you and your recommendations, I have widened my horizons. Yeah, and I'm kind of interested in this new. You and I were talking about this kind of horror light thing that's coming up. Because I'm not really a fan of real horror movies or horror shows or horror books, but I like that edgy supernatural element into the stories. Like, who doesn't love a good ghost story?
Yeah.
So, I think I'd be interested in reading more of those, and I like psychological suspense up to a point. I can wear myself out on that pretty quick. I kind of have to pace myself on psychological suspense. But I would read it.
Do you get asked as an author now established to blurb new authors? Have you discovered new authors that you would want to give a push or a shout out to?
Yeah, I'm not overwhelmed with requests for blurbs, but I think every author who has any kind of name is asked for them. And if I owe that person a favor, if I owe the agent a favor, if I owe the editor a favor, if I owe the bookstore a favor. So I certainly do it for favors, and I certainly do it for friends. And once in a while I get to do it just because of the love of the love of the book. Blurbs from authors, yeah, we do blurb each other's books a lot. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, but fortunately, my author friends can write.
Yes, you don't have to lie.
I don't have to make it up. Yeah.
What has your role been as a writer with your editor? Have you been with your editor? I think you've been with your editor.
Yeah, the fabulous Cindy Wong at Berkeley. She is just, well, I just feel very, very fortunate to have. I had a lot of iffy relationships with editors over the years when I was coming up, but I landed with Cindy at Berkeley, and that was just the perfect match for me. Cindy's one of those editors who's not afraid to let you try something, whether or not you pull it off. She encourages me to try these things and not be afraid. And she gets my books. She understands what I'm doing in a book because she has a gut instinct for the genre. So I always pay attention. If she's got a problem, it needs looking at, because I trust her to recognize. Maybe something that was very clear to me but wouldn't be clear to the reader. Because I was going so fast when I wrote that section, I just kept going and I didn't slow down and get it all on the page. I would think that probably happens more than, that's probably my biggest flaw, that she would tell you, is that it isn't that it isn't there, it's just that I did it in one sentence. I need to put a little more than that kind of thing. So she's the one that catches me on that.
How about your role when it comes to the titles of your books, the packaging of them? Are you someone who just lets the publisher do that, or are you very hands-on?
The problem with me and the packaging is I have absolutely no artistic eye. I am totally at the mercy of the publisher's art department, and Berkeley's been very good to me. I like this cover. I liked all the covers I've had from Berkeley. But when they ask me at the beginning if I have any ideas, I almost always come up blank, because I just don't think visually. Because I don't write description, remember? That's the visual thing, right? But sometimes I'll come up with the titles are back and forth. We kind of switch. We kind of each makes up. She makes up a list. I make up a list, and then we batter back and forth till we both agree on one. I think the problem for titles for authors like me is that we're too close to the story, and we don't always come up with the best titles for our books, or it's too generic. It doesn't say something interesting about the book, because this is all marketing. The cover, the title. You got 3 seconds to catch somebody's eye in a bookstore or even online, and it all has to work like that, and that's a whole nother skill set. It's not mine.
Let's talk a little bit about where you're going next as an author. Can you give us any clues?
Well, in May, or late May or early June, I guess, I do have another Jane Castle coming out with, yes, there will be a dust bunny. Dust bunny's name is Roxy, and I know that's all anybody cares about. So, so my dazzling plot and my clever characters and my lovely description scenes of Illusion Town will probably not matter at all, but yes, there is a dust bunny. And it's called It Takes a Psychic. The cover on that, by the way, is smashing. It's a brilliant gold burst of. You'll see it when it comes. Yeah, it's really quite striking. I'm thrilled with it. That's It Takes a Psychic in June. This winds up this trilogy, and I think the next one's going to be a standalone. Go back to standalones for a while, yeah. But I think within that world that I've created, coming out of the Fog Lake trilogy and coming out of the Lost Night Files trilogy, and it was all born out of the Arcane Society trilogy. It's kind of formed a world, a universe, and I kind of pick and choose now from what I need, elements I need from various, because I like characters from all three of those worlds. So.
Yeah, in your new book, it's Gideon, isn't it? Sweetwater, who has the
Sweetwater.
Who has the connection back. So was that a brilliant plan on your part early on, or just once again you stumbled into something?
That was actually where the editor said, "This is what you're doing." I said, "Oh, I'm writing in 3 different words." She saw it before I did, and she said, "Just think of it as the Jane verse." Works for me. Yeah. This book features Gideon Sweetwater. The Sweetwaters are kind of a problematic family in the stories because historically they were assassins. And I don't really like assassins, it's like, but they do have an edge to them, if for fiction is concerned. So my Sweetwaters are actually all technically good guys deep down, but they have kind of a bad reputation. Yeah. But that's, and they are descended from a clan that a group. The first Sweetwater story actually happens in one of my regencies. Yeah. What they are is they were assassins who hunted the bad guys, the really bad psychics. That's what they do. So, good assassins.
Any hope of you ever going back to Amanda Quick, or should we say never say never? Or?
No, I'm looking for new stories for Amanda Quick. The last set of stories, well, I guess there's about 8 books in the Burning Cove series, were all set in the 1930s, and they were a lot of fun because the 1930s movies dialogue just really fell into place for me. It suited my dialogue-driven style. And the problem with the 1930s for me as a writer is because I do write toward the light and not the dark depression stuff, and I didn't want to do war stuff. So once you take out the worst of the depression and the oncoming war, you're left with about 3 years of happy talk. And I set it on the West Coast so I could pull on the golden era of Hollywood, which gives another lighthearted sense to it. One of the things I learned, anyhow, so I in the first book I mentioned the disappearance of Amelia Earhart, so I'm stuck with that. And the Golden Gate Bridge, bang, I'm stuck with that. So now I have to keep moving forward. But then as I said, I wanted to shake off, I didn't want to go into the war. So I'm dealing with 37, 38, 39. And it was a tight fit. After a while, 8 books, I kind of lost, I didn't have any brilliant story ideas left. So I'm kind of looking for another era for Amanda Quick. We'll see what comes up. Because it's the one name it's kind of resting.
I heard the 50s are popular, but...
Yeah, but see, I was a little kid in the 50s, and I don't remember them as being a real cool
time. It's also difficult to think of a time when you lived as historical fiction.
Yeah, I spent the night...
I lived in the 50s too, so...
All that plastic furniture, and now it's hot. It was cheap, that's why we bought plastic. It was the Jetson stuff, you know? And this has all been brought home to me in a big way, because I'm staying over at the Valley Ho. Which, if you know the hotel, considers itself classic mid-modern, mid-modern, mid-century modern. And you walk into the lobby and it's all the junky music from the 60s, not the good stuff, not the rock and roll from later, but the sha-la-la. Oh, Leader of the Pack, anybody sing that one? 1, 2, 3, all together now. I met him at the candy store. You get the picture? Yes, we see. I could go on, but
I'm just guessing that it's a good thing you're a writer and not an entertainer. Out there, perhaps take some questions from your readers.
Yes.
Any questions for Jayne? Now's your chance.
I thoroughly enjoy Sap and you and Christina on YouTube when I watch you all.
Susan Elizabeth Phillips? Yeah, yeah. I thought you said Sap.
Oh,
And I'm going to tell her that you said Sap.
Don't tell her that, yeah. But we enjoy that so much when you guys get together.
Thank you.
Do you think that has helped readership, or are all the people watching that like me who watched you before there was YouTube?
You probably found the group because you were reading one of us to start with.
Mm-hmm. All of them.
So aside from the entertainment value, I'm not sure it actually sells books. But we love each other in person, so we get together and we have fun. We like to talk books anyway, so. And John's done a few appearances on my Facebook page too, along with my rival Christina. And the three of us have, John, Christina and I just are there for looks, but John tells us about what's new and upcoming in romance, women's fiction, and crime fiction. Like right now, what's hot? What would you say is coming up? You just did an article, or you're writing an article on...
Still in the works, thanks, Jayne. You haven't finished that. There's lots of stuff coming this spring. You'd be surprised 2025 has a lost novella from Elmore Leonard that's in the works this summer. Joe Hill, if you read him, has a book after 8 years. There's a new book coming this month by Sash Bischoff, whose book is it's a debut. It's a twist between Gone Girl and Ed Scott Fitzgerald. So if you're interested in that, it's really interesting. We actually have lots of books that came out this fall. We have an author in the audience, Adriana Allegri, raise your hand, who has a historical novel that just debuted a few months ago. Very intense, very powerful, Sunflower House. So I would encourage you to sign up for the bookstore's newsletter. Barbara talks about new books and forthcoming things. The problem for me is there's too many books. There's not enough time.
Yeah. But we do get together on the channel, on YouTube and Facebook Live, and about every quarter. So you can look at some of the back page on my video page, on my Facebook page. You can go under videos, or you can look at some of the older editions and catch the new ones as they come up. Because it's a big world out there for books, and John's the one who knows them all.
Other questions for Jayne?
Have you ever thought about merchandising your dust bunnies?
Yeah, that's
Merchandising dust bunnies, yeah. No. The dust bunnies, in my mind, were always patterned after, or always looked a lot like one of those overgrown English Angora rabbits. Yeah, that was always my mental image of them. And I'm sure you could buy something like that on Amazon.
Other questions? There's someone way in the back.
I have a couple questions. How long does it actually take you to write, say, one book?
Actual writing time to get down through the second draft, which is where I consider it done, is about 3 or 4 months.
Wow, that's quicker than I would
Yeah.
think.
There's still work to be done after that, but that's usually, but if I'm on the second draft, I know where I'm going, and so so the story is nailed down, and after that, it's cleanup.
Nice.
Lots of cleanup. So it probably goes into the editor at the end of 4 months.
And my second question is, how did you come up with the paranormal psychic parts of your book?
The paranormal psychic
Yeah.
parts of my books. I think I can trace my interest in the psychic thing probably back to my mom. She was kind of into the woo-woo thing before it was cool, you know. Yoga, meditation. I mean, this was the 60s when she was into it. That's how, pre-hippie days. So I kind of grew up with the idea that there was energy out there.
Yeah.
And it wasn't religiously endowed in any one way or the other, but it was kind of power. And that, we've all had the experience of being around people who are just bad energy. How many times do we say, I just don't want to spend any more time with that person, it's just bad energy? Or let's go out, go with someone for dinner or something because they're good energy. And music, how do you explain the power of music if not some form of, it isn't just sound waves hitting your brain, it does something, it triggers some kind of a response that's really, when you think about it, tough to describe. Why do we care about music, And then there's the whole intuition thing. And I think we do influence our own world a lot by going into it with positive thoughts or negative thoughts. So from there I can spin off. Yeah, they can start a fire with their own psychic power. Why not? Bad energy people. But that was the train I was jumping on when I started using it.
I enjoy that.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, like I said, I think it's the ability to just take that one step beyond intuition.
Right. Yes.
And we've all got some, whether we listen to it or not.
Yeah.
So. And where's the line between rational thought, logical thought, and intuition? It's pretty hard to. And how do you explain dreams? After all these years, they're still researching dreams. They don't understand. There's all kinds of theories, but nobody really knows how they work, or even why we do it. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you keep a flow chart of your characters? So like when you brought in Gideon in this one with the Sweetwater name and referencing back and he mentions, this is my family history, this is my legacy, this is what we do, this is our job. We go after the really bad guys that the regular police can't handle. Do you keep a flow chart? Because I love how you intermingle, you slip them in. It's like, oh, yes, more.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoy doing it, and no, I don't keep a flow chart. I wish I had. But I'd have to start now and go back to the beginning, and I would never. I'm too traumatized at the thought.
I know, like Arizona snow, I see constantly people are saying, well, can we have more of her? Can we have more of her? And I'm like, yeah, I'm one of those too, but I love that you make it bigger. It branches.
I think that's part of it. the idea that I'm making it bigger and branching out and having more Sweetwaters and more Joneses and more et cetera, I love to do that, but it's kind of dangerous to play with because I could easily write myself into a corner because I did forget what I did with one of the characters. And I kind of go into it thinking, okay, if I don't remember this character, or if I do remember the other characters, then the audience will too. And that's kind of how I decide whether or not to go forward with it. I never said how big the Sweetwater family was.
Right.
So I never said how big the Jones family was. And that's kind of how when I need more characters, that's how he's a cousin.
Or you slip it in as like we get married and we have lots of children. It's like you don't say how many.
Yeah.
Just, this is important.
Yeah. That's. I should have made a flow chart, but I didn't. Yes.
I was wondering if you have a hard time turning off the book to get into the real life again.
The wine
when
in
I'm
the
reading
evening,
a book,
the
I
wine
can't
in the evening does it every time. But it's one of the reasons I don't. It's what I think you're asking is a hard time getting back into a book, into a series, something that I've written.
No, just as you're writing a book, the story. When I'm reading a book, the story is there, and I have a hard time getting up and doing the dishes because I want to finish that book. I want to know what's going on.
Thank you.
Does you have a problem after writing all morning, turning that off to go do your everyday stuff?
No, it never really goes away when you're actually writing. You're always thinking about it in the back of your head, I think. At least I am. But I do walk away from it in the evenings. With the baking shows and the dinner and a glass of wine and what really gets in the way is if I'm distracted, like with a trip, or where I'm actually away from the story for several days and no way to kind of touch base every day. When I come home, I'll have to start from the beginning and figure out. I'll have forgotten some of what I put in during the time before I left for the trip. So traveling can disrupt it as much as anything, I think.
Question?
When do you do most of your reading? Because that takes time too. Reading books.
Oh,
Any
evening.
books.
The evening.
Evening.
Yeah, that's my evenings are in the chair after the baking show.
Okay. After the you don't fall asleep.
No, but eventually, but that's fine. Yeah.
There was another question?
With books that you have written in the past and the ones you're going to write in the future, is there anyone that you can trust where you take a draft before it's finished and say, read this, what do you think?
No. I don't do that. The first person to read my book will be the editor. At certain points along the way, I'll call up a friend, or even my rival, Christina Dodd. And this is how it can be helpful, right? Okay, so this is a futuristic setting book, a Jane Castle book, and people in glass houses. And I wrote myself into this very nice little corner where I needed my hero and heroine to go into the underworld, which takes underground of Harmony, which takes them in another place altogether. But they had two cars sitting up above ground that we had to get back to Illusion Town, which is a half day's drive. And I pondered and I pondered and I pondered, how am I going to get the cars back if I've sent them down into the underworld? And Christina says, dummy, self-driving cars. So sometimes my arch rival comes in very handy. I've seen all the Waymos around here. Holy cow! Have anybody tried one? It's kind of creepy the way they. It's like a ghost at the wheel.
Any other questions for Jane? I almost said Christina.
You always did like her best.
I did. Go ahead.
Do you have a favorite book that you have, you go back and read it yourself?
Of my own favorite book?
Yes.
It's always the one I'm working on now. Once the story is told, it's behind me. I never go back. If I go back, it's only to catch a character name or something that I need to put into the new book. Yeah.
And
I just
I
went
love
to
to go back and reread.
good.
reread,
That's nice.
reread.
I encourage rereading this. Once the story is told, don't forget I've been through it numerous, too many times to count really. Probably at least 6 times from start to finish fully, and then sections of it as I was updating. It's done. I just never want to see it again. Except in the publishing world.
Is there another author's book that you've reread over and over, or read several times?
Back in the day, my inspirational author was Anne McCaffrey.
Love her, yes.
And she wrote probably the world's first futuristic romantic suspense called Restoree, which I read that when I was 19, and that's why I kept going back and trying to write that futuristic romantic suspense because I just love that story. So Restoree I read several times. She also wrote 2 or 3 regular straight-up gothics, or mysteries, romantic suspense novels. Ring of Fear or something. The Woman with the Horses. Yeah, and a couple others that she then. I don't think they did her career any good, and I think that's why she went into dragons. Never looked back. But those early books were rereads for me. Yeah.
I like her, the Rowan series.
Yeah. She was a heck of a writer. She a lot of what we're seeing now in romantasy can be traced right back to Anne McCaffrey.
Any last questions for Jayne? Before we conclude, I will let people in the audience know we do have our May-June book on order. It's never too early to pre-order books. Authors love that because it helps them ensure they have a future career.
Even for those of us who just write dialogue, we like to know that we have a future career.
Jayne will be happy to sign books. You should have a signing ticket in your books. We will go by number. We'll get Jayne set up here at the desk. Give us a minute or two. Let's go ahead and give her a big round of applause.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun today. I really appreciate it. And it's a sunny Sunday, and I appreciate you coming out.